Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special step up to the mic. Special tribute to Edward Charles Ford, known by the baseball world as Whitey Ford, known as the chairman of the board, holds Yankee records for wins, 236, innings, 3,170, starts, 438, shutouts, 45, 6 World Series rings. We can go on and on. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Whitey Ford passed away on October 8th. He passed away with his family around him. He lived in Lake Success, New York, which is out on Long Island. Kind of fitting, Lake Success, with 11 pennants and 6 World Series rings. He was 91 years old. We know him as a Yankee from 1950 to 1967. With those 6 rings, he was the greatest living Yankee. I could not think of 2 better people to share these memories with and this interview with than Mickey's son, Danny, and Billy Martin Jr. Gentlemen, welcome. Billy, let me start with you. When I say Whitey Ford, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
World Series hero. I mean, a guy that pitched beyond his stuff. A guy that might not even be drafted in today's game of baseball, which is mind-boggling when you look at the fact that he pitched 146 innings in the World Series. Okay, there are starting pitchers today that don't pitch that in a whole season. That's how many World Series innings he pitched, and he pitched it to a 2.71 ERA. I mean, a guy that threw in the 80s. That, like I say, in today's system, in the new system where there's only going to be 20 rounds, Whitey Ford would have to get to the big leagues via independent league baseball.
That's a great point. And you know what, Danny, quickly, we'll go to you. The iconic Mickey Mantle always spoke in reverence to his good buddy, Whitey Ford. Danny?
Yeah, just like, what Billy was saying was when I think of Whitey, I think right away World Series, because growing up, that's all you heard about, because the Yankees were in it quite a bit. And but Dad always talked about how Whitey, if he could have any pitcher on his team during the series, he would always have chosen Whitey Ford. And, his stats tell it.
He was known as a cool character, like you couldn't get rattled. I'm sure that's something that stood out, right, in terms to your dad.
Well, and also you got to remember, Whitey wasn't a real big guy either. And so, like Billy said, I'm not sure what he threw, what his speed was, but he had all sorts of pitches. And so, he was just that type of pitcher, And like a Koufax, he could throw the hell out of the ball,
Right.
Whitey did it like a professor, he had every pitch, so he was just, it was that type of pitcher.
Well, Billy, you pointed it out. That was your point, that he, nowadays the scouts are slaves to the radar gun. So if he's throwing in the high 80s, even though he had quite the repertoire, it would have been, like, just as you said, he would have had to go through an independent league or something like that. That was a great point, if you can expand on that.
Well, the draft's getting shorter, and scouts are being fired from teams all over baseball. And, there are a lot of teams that believe in analytics, that they can statistically and looking at a player's stuff through TrackMan or Rapsodo, which are these different services that look at the spin rate of a player's fastball or curveball or look at how much movement their fastball has or their curveball has. And it is great and interesting stuff. But Whitey Ford is absolute living proof that it's a lot more than velocity. It's a lot more than insane stuff. You know, Greg Maddux, who's a Hall of Famer like Whitey, was not a big velocity guy either. And so, you know, I wish the world would look more at guys like him, because you can't measure, to me, the most important analytics, which are right between a guy's ears. And like Mickey said, who do you want on the mound in that big game? You want Whitey Ford. You want the guy that surpassed Babe Ruth's record of consecutive innings pitched in the World Series scoreless. Whitey set the bar at 33 2/3 innings, scoreless innings. I mean, his ERA in 16 years of playing the game was a 2.79, but it was even better in the World Series against the best team, the best players in the brightest moment. And he is walking proof that we need to also take into consideration just how good a guy does his job at actually getting people out.
That's a great point. And you know what? There's so many statistics. We'll sprinkle them in as we go along. But Danny, let me go back to you. As the human element, as you guys are pointing out, that's kind of getting lost in today's game. When you stop and think that they were such good friends, the three of them, and you know, Whitey was a New Yorker. He was born on the east side of Manhattan, and you know, he was a New York City kid. And just as I mentioned before, he grew up a Yankee fan, idolized Joe D. So he's a New Yorker. Danny, your dad was from Middle America, and you know, Billy, your dad was a Cali kid, right? So, but the three of them, they bonded like three amigos. No, Danny?
Oh yeah, that's what people called them, you know. And so they were just, you know, those three guys. There were probably no three guys like them. I mean, they like to have fun, you know, they like to go out and things, but they took the game serious, you know, and they really wanted to win. And, you know, not just them, but I'm saying, you know, those three guys. And Billy, I mean, I tell Billy all the time when I talk to people about his dad, you know, because a lot of people just think of Billy Martin as a manager, you know. And I tell him, I said, man, do me a favor, go look at the 1952-53 World Series and just look at Billy Martin's stats. They're outstanding, and better than anybody on the team those 2 years. I mean, 52, you know, it was his defense. 53, he did it with his bat, you know. And it's just an amazing thing, you know, to think that, you know, those three guys, I guess what I'm saying is they were very clutch.
It's really neat to look at those three guys because, like you said, they came from such different parts of the country. You know, here you have my father, who was so poor and born on the docks in Berkeley, but he was brash and brazen and outspoken and had to fight for everything he had. Then you have the middle America country boy, the Commerce Comet, big, strong freak of an athlete, but he was shy and more reserved and nervous to talk to Joe DiMaggio. And then you have the chairman of the board, the New York guy, the politician who could schmooze his way in anywhere. And the three of them together made such an awesome team. And they filled all these gaps for each other. And they fed off each other. And that's why, in my opinion, they were such World Series heroes. You know, they all played better than they really were in the World Series. And then that was all the postseason was back then. It was just the World Series, but they fed off each other, and it was neat because my father wasn't anywhere near them as a regular everyday player, but in those bright lights, he was going to hang with his best buddies.
Our viewers would be interested to hear more about this. You have players that play in the Major League Baseball on the Major League level. When you put your scouting hat on for a moment, do you find yourself falling into the trap of the radar gun for pitchers and exit velocity for hitters?
I don't know about the trap. I believe in the statistics. I love to delve in that. One of my clients, I'm a certified agent. One of my clients got a major league contract a couple of years ago because of his analytics, because he had the second most movement on his fastball in Major League Baseball, because his spin rate on his curveball was in the top 91 percentile. It was neat. It would not have happened 10 years ago the way it did for him. That said, you still got to get people out. And as much as I do love and believe in analytics, you've got to hit your spots. You've got to get people out. And so, whoever finds the right mix of meshing all this stuff together, because you can go out and scout these guys. This guy that may have the most ridiculous spin rate ever, and I might watch him throw the ball 4 times and say, "Oh, that shoulder's going to go. That elbow's blowing out this season, next season." Statistics don't tell you things like that. This guy's max effort. I'm looking for a guy with minimal effort that's smooth and relaxed. And I want all that other stuff too. So you've got to find a way to integrate it all together. But Whitey Ford might not even get that opportunity today unless he went to a great college and had a chance to win the College World Series and pitch on that bright stage where everybody sees, wow, this guy really is great. Maybe we should give him a chance, even though he only throws 87 miles an hour. But out of high school, no way.
How fitting it was that in his dying day, he's watching the Yankees on TV. They're playing in the ALDS. They're playing against Tampa Bay. And the game that he was watching when he passed was a game that they won that set up the deciding game, Game 5.
Love you.
Of a 5-game series. And how cool was it and fitting was it that they paid tribute to Whitey and they put his number on their uniform and all. Did you guys get a chance to see that game?
Absolutely.
Sure did. Very obviously sad day, but it was nice to see that they were celebrating him at the same time. So, it was just a great thing to see.
Would have been nice if they would have come away with the victory. I'm sure they desperately wanted to win for Whitey. And we talk about how important pitching is, and it was no fault of Garrett Cole. I mean, he's a throwback. When I watched Garrett Cole, I couldn't be more proud of him in those pinstripes, because not only is he a dominant pitcher, but he has the passion, and wearing pinstripes means something to him, and he pitched his heart out in that game. But Billy, when it comes to managers, your dad was fearless, and he did like statistics. He was, everyone said how prepared he was once the game started, etc. But he also had a very visceral to his approach. He went with his gut many times. Bill?
you know, I often hear from people, your father wouldn't have liked all this analytics garbage and yada, yada. That is a bunch of bunk. My father would have loved having all that information at his fingertips. The more, the better. That said, he still would have played his own hunches quite often. He would not have gone by the book or by the analytics every time. He's still going to steal a base every now and then. He's still going to steal home. He's still going to lay down a bunt. That was who he was. And he thought innings ahead, but he would have loved that information. And we all saw this last World Series. We were all screaming at the television, don't take out Blake Snell. What are you thinking? You know, I don't see my father pulling the trigger there. I think he goes with his guy. I think it would have been easier for him to look in the mirror at the end of the game and say, I lost the game with my best guy.
Danny, I have to ask you, how fitting was it that Mickey and Whitey were such good friends? And how fitting was it that they both went into the Hall of Fame together in 1974?
Yes.
That was huge. I mean, I can remember the excitement with my dad. And, you know, I think a lot of it was because he was doing it with Whitey. And that just meant the world to him, to both of them. And so, you know, we took a bus from New York City up to Cooperstown. All the families were on the bus, and boy, I wish I had video of that. That was so great. You know, Phil Rizzuto, everybody was on there, all their families. And, you know, it was just a great time. And, you know, that was a thing there. And, you know, I wish Billy could have been in with them, you know.
And deservedly so. We've talked about this in the past, but when you think of the entire body of work between Billy Martin, the player, and Billy Martin, the manager, he, without question, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Correct, Danny?
Oh, for sure. And, you know, I'm close to Billy, and, you know, Billy was like my uncle, you know, or something. And, but you know, you can ask any of the coaches or managers from all that era when Billy managed, every one of them will tell you that he should be in the Hall of Fame. And so, I mean, just look at the stats. I mean, look at what he did for teams that, you know, lost 100 games the year before he joined, you know, brought them to first, second place, whatever. You know, it's just amazing.
Most beautiful time of the year. It's Christmas, and you have your beautiful Christmas tree in the back. You're feeling in a festive mood. Dan, you got the picture of your dad behind you. It's just a perfect setting. Do you have any memories of yourself with with your dad in terms of when you were a kid growing up?
At Christmas?
Yeah.
Several. I mean, we had our Christmases were like anyone else's, you know. Everybody'd get up together, have breakfast, you know, and do the presents and all that, and then football. You know, so it was all pretty much the same. But we had you know, when I was like, I don't know, 16, my favorite memory is because they had a home in Joplin, Missouri too. And so and there was one day, I think it was Christmas Eve, and Dad, he got me and he said, come on, he goes, because I'd been wanting some cowboy boots. And he said, I know a place in town. So I said, all right, you know, so just me and him went. He got me the cowboy boots and stuff. And then after we had been at the cowboy store getting the boots and whatever else we got, I can't remember, but he said, come on, I want you to, I was driving. He said, let me show you some places that we used to, you know, go to back when they were, you know, in the 50s and stuff. And so I said, sure, that'd be great. I mean, it thrilled me to death, you know. So It was so weird and crazy, but it made me feel so good to see him, how happy he was to go into these places. Not just because, we were having drinks or whatever. It was everyone in there knew who he was. And some of the people that used to work there way back were still there, you know. And you could just tell my dad enjoyed it so much because these people, I guess they were like Mick, like him, and so he just hit it off with everybody. And so, but it was just meant a lot to me to see, where he came from, meet these people, hear their stories, hear his stories to them. And it was just, you know, that's my favorite Christmas story with my dad.
That's a beautiful one. And you know what? It's fitting in a way because Mickey was so inherently generous. He was like a Santa Claus himself. You told me a story about it was around Christmas time, and there's somebody that's poor, does not have the wherewithal of the or the money, with two flat tires. Danny, just pick up the story briefly from there.
Well, this is a story of my oldest brother, Mickey Jr. Um, I wish he was here to tell it, but him and Dad had gone out, and I believe it was Christmas Eve. And anyway, they were down near our house where we all grew up, and there's a service station there. Dad needed gas. He pulls in. Well, there's a man there with, I believe it was either one or two kids with him, and Dad could tell something was going on. And the car had two flats. Well, I don't know if he had Mickey Jr. with him in the store or not, or Mickey Jr. walked in. Anyway, my brother said that he heard my dad telling the attendant, because the man didn't have the money to get the two tires fixed. He had presents in his car. They were obviously going to somewhere for their Christmas, right?
Yep.
And he couldn't afford to get the tires. Dad gave the guy like $200 and said, "You put two tires on that guy's car, he's got to get home for Christmas." And my brother Mickey, for some reason that just hit my brother so hard, and he thought about that all the time. But I'm probably missing some of the story, but he could tell it so good. And those are stories that people don't know about Mickey Mantle. He was such a giving person, and like Billy, Whitey, all those guys. I mean, they'd give the shirt off their back.
Yep.
And it's just
That sums it up. That's sums up Mickey. That's a beautiful story, and we've heard that many, many times about his generosity.
yeah.
So it's just something that is so special about
Yeah.
him. Billy, um, this one's a little tougher for me to talk about. I can only imagine you. When I think of Christmas, we all think, as Yankee fans, we all remember your dad's passing, and I started crying when I heard the story. And I can tell you this, that I share a little bit with you when you and your family got that shocking phone call where your dad passed. Same thing happened to me when I was a 10-year-old boy. You get the call that nobody wants, whether you're a parent or a child, where you're hearing on the other end that, as a 10-year-old kid, I'm finding out that my father died. And you get that call, and it's so shocking to you. And Billy, when you think about, there's never a time a good time or anything like that, but when you think about your dad passing on Christmas Eve, I cried, and the entire Yankee universe cried, and we shared your pain. We just want to let you know that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was obviously a tough moment. I was with my mother and her now husband sharing Christmas, and we I was flying out to see Dad the next day. Well, this was pre-cell phone days, so we weren't watching TV. Um, People were trying to call me at my house, but I wasn't at my house. I was at my mother's house. I didn't find out for a couple hours, actually. And like I say, I was flying out to see Dad the next day. It's obviously tainted Christmas to some degree for me, but having kids and seeing the joy in their eyes on Christmas morning kind of has helped bring all that back. I
Well,
it never just goes away. You don't just wake up one day and go, great, I'm over it now. You know that. You were 10 years old. You still miss your dad, right?
that's right.
I still talk to him. But, as New Yorkers would say, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I love the story Billy told me about. I mean, it's not a funny story or anything, but at Billy's funeral, Billy Jr. kind of broke down, and he said a guy kind of helped him up a little bit by the shoulders, and I'm not sure how he did it, but I guess he kind of said it to Billy. I don't know. You didn't know who it was, did you, Billy?
No, not in that moment. He grabbed me under my armpit, kind of straightened me up.
Were you like on your knees or something, or?
No, I was just starting to convulse in tears.
Okay.
I had to follow my father's,
Yeah, I know.
The procession outside.
Yeah.
And I started to lose it. And somebody grabbed me and lifted me up and said, walk outside with me and look at how many people loved your father. And
to me, that's a great story, because as Billy tells it, he tells it excellent, but to have Richard Nixon, telling you that about your father had to be just so, even, it's a sad as hell event. And to have something like that had to at least get you through the rest. You know what I mean? I don't know, but.
Oh, it was very special. It was, we walked outside and you couldn't even see the sidewalks in New York City because there were so many people and they were holding signs, and there were signs with a number 1 with a halo on top of it. And we loved you, Billy, and, Yankee forever, and all these signs and people everywhere. And it overwhelmed me, and it helped me catch my snap. And that's when I looked over and realized it was Richard Nixon that did that. And it meant a lot. And then we got in the limo, and I'm with my father's wife and my sister, my half sister Kelly, and my father's driver Tex, who was a former New York cop who drove him everywhere and always kept him out of trouble. And he turned on the radio to the only country western station in New York at the time. And he turned it on and the radio went dead. There was air silence for a good 30, 40 seconds, which meant somebody probably got fired, right? Because that's not supposed to happen in New York City. And then a song came on by Clint Black that I'd never heard before. And the title of the song is Leaving Here a Better Man. And it starts off, what do you say when it's over? And ironically, the song's about a lost relationship, but it obviously has different meaning for me. And that was a great moment.
And I could tell you that all diehard Yankee fans that are old enough love Billy Martin, the player, the manager, and the person, because he was a fighter, he was a scrapper, he was a lover, he was tough, but yet he was smart and street smart and everything. And everyone loved Billy Martin, and everybody loved Mickey Mantle, the those that are old enough. So it's an honor to talk to you two gentlemen today and tie everything together and to do it with the thought in mind that we're paying tribute to Whitey Ford, because it was all about winning, and no one did it like those three and that team. And gentlemen, I'm going to give you the last word. Billy, let me start with you. Just give us, give us a final thought on Whitey Ford, and again, we'll leave it at that.
I really have three things I need to say. One is in response to what you just said. I want you to understand one thing. My father hired 2 spring training coaches in that year in 1977. Their names were Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford. They came on and did a spring training coaching job. For maybe the first and only time they've ever done that, I don't know. So maybe there's some magic there.
Never thought about that, Bill.
Well, come on. You know, I lost my hair thinking about stuff like that.
Well, you're on a roll. You said you had 3 things. Go ahead.
I do. In regards to the Copacabana, those guys were standing up for a man by the name of Sammy Davis Jr. There was a bowling team throwing racial slurs at Sammy. And Dad and Mickey and Whitey and Hank and the Yankees that were there stood up and said, hey, not on our watch. You're not saying that to our friend Sammy. You shut your mouth or we're going to shut it for you. And that's what happened.
You know, one of the coolest things I remember, Billy, is at your dad's roast. You know, they had people talk before that couldn't be there, but they got film of them, you know. And Sammy Davis was on there telling Billy, you know, he wished he could be there and this and that. And, but I don't remember how Sammy worded it, but it was so specific. I mean, it just was perfect, you know. And you could see they put the camera right on Billy, and he was kind of tearing up, you know, and it just meant a lot to him. You could tell. So,
No, you know, those guys had so much fun hanging out together. Our fathers hung out with the Rat Pack at Toots Shores. They hung out with Gleason and Sinatra and Sammy Davis and Dean Martin, and those guys would ask sports stories, and our dads would ask what it's like to date Angie Dickinson.
I want to say one thing more about Billy. Not long ago, I'd seen his Yankeeography, and they were showing the day that he got his monument and all that out in the park, and it was Billy Martin Day. And so the last words, you know, what he was said on his speech was, I may not have been the greatest Yankee, but I was the proudest. And that just hit me the other day. I was like, wow, you know, because it makes sense, you know. Because once he left the Yankees, you know, he was never the same player. You know, he wasn't happy anywhere, man. And like Billy said, you know, he goes to Oakland, turns that team, you know, managing, and turns it into a hell of a, you know, just a freaking great team. You know, the attendance went up by what, 2 million or something. So it was crazy, but that didn't mean anything to him. He wanted to get back to New York. And so I don't know. I just thought of all that stuff when I saw that Yankeeography and Billy saying that, you know. I actually kind of broke up on it because it was just, you know, it's so heartfelt, you know.
Billy, you had a third point you were going to share with us?
Absolutely. So when my father found out that he had been traded to the Kansas City Athletics, the Yankees waited until they were playing the Athletics the next day in New York to save money so they didn't have to fly him wherever. They pulled him in the office. They said, "You've been traded. You're getting dressed in the other locker room tomorrow. I'm playing for the other team." He was obviously devastated. He told his two brothers, Mickey and Whitey. They went out that night. Whitey happened to be pitching the next day. Now, obviously, those three amigos went out on a regular basis, but Whitey never went out the night before he pitched. He did this night. They drank. They cried. They went through it all. Whitey tells my father, second at bat, second pitch, I'm grooving a fastball right in your honey hole. Don't you hit it out of the ballpark. Well, needless to say,
yeah, I won't.
needless to say, as my father's jogging the bases on that home run, Whitey is calling him names we can't say right now. When my father steps up to bat his next time, Whitey throws one at his head, knocks him down, and that was Dad's, I don't know, swan song, and the three amigos' swan song as players together, and it kind of epitomizes all of their love, all of their respect for the game. But at the end of the day, they all want to win.
Yeah, and those three guys loved each other so much, and you know, it's great to have friends like that, believe me.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for sharing all the stories that you did. Yankee fans love their team, and the reason why they love their team in many ways is in the embodiment of Whitey and Mickey and Billy.